Jesus stood outside the temple in Jerusalem and made a shocking prediction. He looked at the massive stones and magnificent buildings and told his disciples that not one stone would be left on another. Every single block would be thrown down. 40 years later, the Roman army completely destroyed the temple exactly as he said. Today we begin our study of Mark 13 and Luke 21 by looking at the moment this prophecy was spoken. Good day, Grace Keepers. My name is Joe, and this is Daily Dose of God. Welcome. Before we jump in, I'm sure some of you guys saw that we had 2 videos there and then they were gone. I took them down, and the reason for that is really, it got so busy. I do everything myself, and I love it, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because that's not what I mean. I can't believe every time I open up my Bible, I learn something new, like every time. Anyway, I don't want to burden you with all of the details. I just found that I was really overwhelmed, and I rushed through them, which is something I never do. And sometimes you have to hear some things many times before you realize that you might have got some things wrong or said things the wrong way, and I can't point to anything more than my research brought in a book outside the Bible, and I never do that. And it made me so uncomfortable. And even though, I checked and double checked and I made sure that what I was saying was true or at least factual according to, sometimes you just got to listen to your gut, because I put them out anyway. And God just really put it on my heart today to take them down. I just decided to start over completely from the beginning. And I'm really glad that I did, because these new episodes are much clearer. I hope you'll enjoy them and find them helpful. All right, pull up a chair. It's time to get to work. We're going to read Mark 13, 1 and 2, and Luke 21, 5 and 6. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, "As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down." Mark 13, 1 and 2, and Luke 21, 5 and 6 both record the same moment. But each gospel gives us a slightly different angle on what the disciples were seeing and how Jesus responded. Both passages show the disciples impressed by the temple's size and beauty. In Mark, one disciple points out the massive stones and magnificent buildings. In Luke, the disciples remark about the beautiful stones and the gifts dedicated to God. The temple was the center of Jewish life, worship, and national identity. It had been expanded and beautified over decades under Herod the Great, with enormous foundation stones that weighed hundreds of tons. To the disciples, this structure looked permanent, impressive, and secure. Jesus responds with words that would have been shocking. He says, "The entire complex will be completely destroyed. Not one stone will remain on another. Every block will be thrown down." He's describing a total demolition. The temple that looked like it would stand forever would be reduced to rubble. This prophecy is often connected by many throughout history to the events of AD 70. And I have to tell you, this is one of the things that really crossed me sideways, because a lot of my research called me out on the table for my beliefs, and I'm hoping that I can get a little bit of help from you all down in the comments about this. I'll explain further as we go along here. When the Roman army destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, historical accounts describe the temple being burned and then systematically dismantled until the site was left as an empty platform. Whether you see this as the primary fulfillment or as a near-term picture of something greater, the text itself makes one thing clear. Jesus was telling his disciples that the physical structure they trusted would not last. This opening scene sets the foundation for everything that we're going to study this week in our road back to Revelation. We've already gone through the entire book of Daniel, which showed us God's long-term plan for world empires. We have also studied Matthew 24 and 25, which gave us the overall timeline of the end times. And now we're fulfilling the details by comparing Mark and Luke's accounts of the same conversation Jesus had with his disciples on the Mount of Olives. The destruction of the temple is the first major event Jesus predicts in this discourse. It serves as a real historical anchor point. When we see that this prophecy came true in a way that matched the details Jesus gave, it gives us confidence that the rest of his warnings about the future will also come to pass. Mark and Luke together help us see both the urgency and the practical details of what Jesus was preparing his followers to face. This moment also reveals something important about how Jesus teaches. He begins with something the disciples could see and touch: a massive, beautiful building that they trusted. And he uses it to point them toward a future they could not yet see. This pattern runs throughout the entire Olivet Discourse. Jesus takes what is visible and uses it to explain what is coming. The temple represented stability, security, and the presence of God to the Jewish people. By declaring its total destruction, Jesus was forcing his disciples to shift their trust away from physical structures and onto his words. This is why starting here matters so much. Everything that follows in Mark 13 and Luke 21 flows out of this opening statement. The warnings about wars, persecution, cosmic signs, and the return of Christ all come after Jesus first dismantles their confidence in the temple. He is preparing them to live in a world where the things they thought were permanent would not hold. And we could use that same preparation as we move through the study. The disciples were standing in front of one of the most impressive structures in the ancient world. Their temple was not just big, it was a symbol of their nation, their faith, and their security. It had stood for generations, been expanded with enormous wealth and engineering, and represented everything that felt stable and lasting. When Jesus said that it would be completely destroyed, he was striking at the very foundation of what they trusted. The same pattern repeats throughout history. People and nations repeatedly place their security in visible, impressive systems. Whether those are temples, empires, governments, financial institutions, modern technology, it doesn't matter. These things all look permanent until they're not. Empires that seemed unstoppable have risen and fallen. Financial systems that appeared unbreakable have collapsed. Technology that promised to solve every problem has instead created new vulnerabilities. The human tendency is to look at what is big, organized, and impressive, and assume it will endure. Jesus' warning at the very beginning of this conversation is still relevant today. He was telling his disciples not to put their ultimate trust in physical structures or human systems, no matter how solid they appear. When we watch instability in the Middle East daily, economic uncertainty or the rapid changes in global systems, we're reminded that nothing built by human hands, will last. It's not guaranteed to last, and it won't last. The temple looked like it would stand for centuries. It did not. This does not mean we ignore practical preparation or withdraw from the world. Well, maybe a little bit. It means we hold these things loosely. We can build and plan and secure what we're able to, but we're not to anchor our hope or our sense of safety in anything but God. The same Jesus who predicted the fall of the temple also promised to be with his people through whatever comes next. That is the shift he was calling his disciples to make on that day. And it's the same shift he calls us to make now. When current events feel overwhelming, this opening passage gives us a different way to see them. The things that look permanent are not the things that will ultimately hold. Jesus began this entire conversation by making that clear, so his followers would not be caught off guard when the structures they trusted began to shake. We started all this with Jesus saying the temple would be destroyed. He started with the one thing the disciples believed would never fall, the physical center of their faith and their nation. By doing this, he was making a foundational point that would shape everything that he said after. The things that look permanent are not the things that will ultimately hold. This matters for us today because we're still tempted to do the same thing that the disciples did. We look at the systems and the institutions, the economies and technologies that appear strong and organized, and we assume they'll continue. Jesus' words challenge that assumption right from the start. He's preparing his followers to live with their hope anchored somewhere else, not in buildings, not in government, or networks or people, but in his word and his promises. As we move through the week in Mark 13 and Luke 21, we're going to see this same pattern repeated. Jesus will continue to redirect his disciples away from what is visible and temporary, and toward what is eternal and trustworthy. That shift is meant to create clarity and stability in the middle of this crazy, chaotic world. So, just to say a little bit more about what I mentioned earlier, I have always believed that Israel coming back together in 1948 sort of started the clock, and that's what the Bible meant by this generation. I'm not going to go into all the details because I do get into it more as the week goes on. Can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe that this is even true, but I don't remember anybody in my Christian atmosphere ever saying anything different than that version. I realize that there are some people that believe that some of the things that Jesus said on the Mount of Olives actually already happened in AD 70. And I will explain all of this as the week goes on. Tomorrow we're going to continue on into the beginning of the birth pains, where Jesus describes wars, rumors of wars, and early signs that will increase as the end approaches. And we're going to dig a little bit more into the discrepancies that I'm struggling with right now regarding the end times and Titus and AD 70. Thank you all for being here, folks. God bless you and yours. And I really can't wait to see you here tomorrow. Have a great day, folks.